There's more data than there ever has been in the hands of artists, as you said.
100%.
You used to have to sign to a label if you really wanted to get kind of, focus group level, kind of consumer insights.
Yeah.
These days, so much of that stuff is
at your
available
fingertips.
at your fingertips. So I would say, just keep an eye under the hood on what's reacting and what's not. It's a process of elimination, especially with the more scattergun kind of asymmetrical platforms like TikTok, services like Reels and Shorts, where you're not just seeing stuff from who you follow, you're seeing stuff from everyone, and it's incredibly scattergun. So you can just test and learn. Honestly, that's when
iterate.
When we're on iterate, exactly.
Hey everyone, thank you for tuning in. You're listening to the Music to Your Ears podcast. I am your co-host, Danny Garcia, joined by
Jimmy Mikaoui.
And today our guest is Tom Hoare, the Global Director of Audience Development and Partnerships at PS. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, no, super excited. We're here at Indie Week in New York, and lots of ideas being tossed around, lots of really cool innovations. So really excited to dive in. But where we really wanted to start was just learning about your origin story. How did you get to this role? How did you get into the music industry in the first place, and what led you down this path?
Sure, yeah. Great question. I will start off by saying that, as you said, we're at Indie Week, and unfortunately this is at the tail end of Indie Week, so my voice is a little bit hoarse because I've been doing a lot of yapping, a lot of mixes and panels and whatnot. But if we had recorded on Monday morning, I maybe wouldn't be sounding quite so scratchy, but it's Thursday afternoon instead, so forgive me. Yeah, my journey kind of into the music biz was when I was a teenager. I wanted to be an actor, and I was drawn to kind of performance from a young age. And as well as acting, I was writing and directing and putting on my own shows and stuff. And I also played music and piano and guitar and performed in school concerts and stuff. I even did stand-up comedy at one point at school. So I was really trying everything out. And then through writing, I got quite into journalism. And I loved music, and I thought to myself, I'll be a music journalist. That's what I'll do. And I was working, my first job in music really was, I worked in Sydney, Australia for a couple of years.
Oh, wow.
I kind of landed there after some travels after graduating university in the UK. Landed in Sydney, and I got a job as the receptionist, the temp receptionist at this TV company that's called Foxtel, which is like the Australian version of a Comcast or a Sky in the UK, like a big, pay TV provider. And amongst the suite of channels that I was the receptionist for were these music channels called Channel V, which was an amazing Australian music TV channel, the type of music TV channel that doesn't really exist much anymore. Like, as well as showing music videos, it also had loads of great music programming. It would do interviews with artists. They would do coverage of festivals, music news, whatever. And they had a website, which was, and they had social media presences, which was quite new at the time. This is the late 2000s, right?
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And I made friends with the dude that ran the website and ran the social properties. And he was like, if you ever want to do some writing for us, we publish artist interviews, we publish album reviews, news articles, whatever. And I was like, oh, hell yeah, I'd love to do that, because music journalism was one of the things that I was most interested in. So I started doing that kind of on the side. I ended up staying at the company and got sponsored on a visa and stayed in Australia for a while. And I was doing that. And then I was also freelancing for a couple of other Australian music websites and music in print press as well, interviewing artists and whatever. I then moved back to London and tried my hand at the freelance music journalist game there. But the music industry in Australia, whilst it's fantastic, it's small, right?
Yeah.
And so it wasn't that difficult to break into the ranks of the kind of music journalism game there. In London, it's a much, much bigger, much more competitive marketplace. And so I was finding myself, not really having much luck trying to crack into that. And my then girlfriend, now wife, was like, why don't you apply for some jobs at record labels? And I was like, I mean, you have to have gone to college and like done music industry management to work there. Like, I love music, but I don't know about the business and how it works and what kind of deals artists sign to and whatever. And she was like, no, you don't. Like, I'm sure you can just apply for a job and, learn on the job and whatever. And so I started PS where I now am, but this was the first time at PS.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Because I'm on my second go round at PS. So I started at PS in 2012, and I was doing digital. I was focusing a lot on YouTube and Vivo. YouTube as a kind of monetization platform rather than just like somewhere to dump music videos was a very new concept. Content ID was quite a new thing. Channel management, channel strategy was all quite new. And so it was exciting to be kind of at the forefront of PS's efforts in that space. I then left PS to go to Polydor, which is a frontline label of Universal Music. And I did 3 years there on the digital team. I think because I came from an indie, naturally I was put on a lot of the more alternative leaning stuff from the Polydor roster. So I worked on things like the 1975 and Haim, James Blake, Michael Kiwanuka, Elbow, as well as, you know, the pure pop stuff as well. But I definitely had a fun time kind of working on Polydor's more alternative leaning stuff.
Yeah.
I left Polydor to take a brief step out of music, and I went into film. I went to be the head of digital for Universal Pictures in London, which was a fantastic learning experience and amazing to get another perspective on entertainment marketing and audience building and entertainment. But I think what it just underscored for me was like, I love music, and that's where I need to be. Sometimes you take a step away from something
to get back to
rediscover your love for it. And so I did a couple of years at NBC Universal, and then I went back into music at Sony Music, and did about a year there. And then unfortunately I was a victim of a wide round of redundancies that happened when Psycho Music, which was the label that I worked for under Sony, which had been a joint venture between Simon Cowell and Sony Music, those two companies split, essentially parted ways, and a casualty of that was the label group staff left the business. And then a couple of months of soul searching and thinking about what I want to do next, chatting to various people about what was out there, what was going on. And of course I had stayed in touch with people at PS because I'd had such a great time working there the first time round. And it just so happened that they were looking for someone like me to come in. And so I rejoined PS in 2020, running digital marketing and audience development and streaming partnerships for the label group side of the business. Because PS is divided into the label group, which is the in-house group of recordings and licenses and stuff. And then there's also a separate artist and label services and distribution business, which we call Integral. So I don't work on that. I'm strictly on our in-house labels. And so I rejoined the business in 2020. I moved over to LA to work out of our US office in 2023. And then 2 months ago, I switched coasts, and I'm now based here in New York City. So that's my journey. That's a long answer.
No, it's a great story because I mean, one of the things, and ahead of obviously reading your LinkedIn and everything, one of the questions I wanted to ask, and maybe we could start there. What overlap, if there is any at all, is there between digital marketing and film and digital marketing and music? Like, is there things that you can bring in? Are there things that maybe artists can take advantage of that are overlooked?
To be honest, sorry, go ahead. Did you have a question?
No, go for it. In other words, what do they do better than we do?
Exactly.
I'm going to be honest with you. I think it's what can the movies learn from music marketing? And I think that actually I would speculate that one of the reasons that I was hired there is because coming from the music marketing world, it's actually we don't appreciate how in the music business we're kind of at the apex of new ways of finding audiences, new innovative experimental ways of funneling audiences from one place to another, right? And I think that actually they quite liked that I had that experience, because film marketing the lead times are much, much longer, right? You will build your kind of train track very measuredly and very consideredly, some might say formulaically. And then you will pick the train up and put it on the track, and you will sit back and watch as the train goes along the track. And there's not many surprises, to be honest with you. There's not really many organic headwinds that can come out of nowhere and like suddenly
take
the
off.
film marketing plan needs to look completely different to how it did yesterday. It's not really like that. It tends to just be, you know, you have your audiences, you have your targeting, you have your creative, you have the funnel that you're trying to move people through. The film is rolling out. You have your trailer drop. You have your other kind of key moments. But there's not really so much potential for something totally unexpected to happen that like sends it off in a different direction. Whereas exactly like with music, you know, sometimes you'll come into the office and it's like, whoa, we got added to the Radio 1 A-list way sooner than we were expecting to. Or, whoa, you know, a Kardashian used our track in the background of their Instagram story. And now we've gone from getting 25,000 plays a day to 250,000 plays a day. We need to suddenly activate, you know, another, like we've been given an extra 20 grand of spend to just, you know, so those dynamic shifts are, for me, one of the most exciting things about the music industry, and I loved that. And so I would say the answer to your question is the other way around. And I think what they could learn is a little bit more agility and a little bit more like, let's see how it's going to go. Let's see what the sentiment is. And also what I found frustrating there was, you know, in music, there's a certain amount of just creative risk taking. You know, sometimes you'll do something for an artist's fan base just to do it. Do you know what I mean? Just because you think it's going to be a cool moment and the fans are going to get a kick out of it. And, oh, we're going to have the artist turn up in an ice cream truck in Bryant Park down the street selling ice creams. Like, are we going to be able to quantify what the ROI on that is? Probably not, no. You know, but is it going to be content that we can utilize that, you know, makes a moment, gets people talking, maybe drives awareness and kind of drives affinity? You betcha. But I think that sometimes you can find yourself in more commercial corporate environments where there's less of that kind of just risk taking. And there's more like everything has to be justified. Everything has to be, you know, dollars and cents worked out on what the kind of ROAS is going to be on this. And that's not a thing that you can always offer in music. And we're quite, I think, forgiving in music of just like, well, we'll know that it worked because, you know, we're so across the kind of tiniest little changes in direction in the campaign. But will we be able to put a kind of, you know, dollars and cents of like revenue driven off the clicks driven, you know, conversions driven? No.
Yeah. But no, to your point, we should probably give ourselves more credit. The funny thing is how expectations are set in the music industry, because you were very kind in your examples, but there's many meetings where the question is, how do we create the viral moment then will help everyone to agitate. So I love that the benchmark has moved to how do you capitalize on a viral moment happening to we absolutely need our own viral moment. When is it coming?
Totally. And I think like we've had experience in the last, you know, in the last 12 months or longer of being very reactive to a sudden track going viral. What I would absolutely never claim to have been able to do is like engineer a viral moment, because I genuinely think anyone that says that, anyone that goes to a job interview and says like, yeah, I'm an expert at crafting virality out of nowhere, I think is talking rubbish. I was going to say another word there, but I'm not sure if we can swear. It's talking rubbish. These
are the New York tapings. There's been way more swearing than we had on the West Coast.
Really? Okay. All right. I'll loosen up a bit then. You know, I think we've had tracks that have just kind of really blown up off the back of, sometimes it's quite hard to discern what, you know, like I'll give a couple of examples. You know, we work with this fantastic Irish hip hop trio called Mikaoui, who they've just been blowing up, you know, off the back of, they had a very successful film that was distributed by Sony Pictures. The album did really, really well. They, you know, have caught people's imagination and tapped into the zeitgeist and the conversation around a lot of things that's going on geopolitically at the moment. Coachella was a huge moment for them. And tracks are just going viral on their TikTok with a bunch of different, you know, trends. It kind of is not one particular. And sometimes the temptation is to flatten it and be like, it's going viral because of this, like, and all the top UGC is around this trend. So this is what we should kind of lean into and double down into. But actually, you need to understand that it's more kaleidoscopic than that. It's more like some people are using it for like funny anti-UK sentiment, you know, like there's a lot of that because they're very politically outspoken against, British occupancy of Ireland. But then there's also people just making, kind of funny meme content, funny drug content because they joke about drugs a lot in their songs. Yeah. So, and then another, kind of flip side of that is this artist that we have called Anna of the North, who's fantastic. And she's a project that we're gearing up to work on new releases from, which I'm really excited. And she's actually playing here in New York in a couple of days at the Central Park Summer Stage. She has a song called Lovers, which was released in 2017. It was synced in a Netflix movie called To All the Boys I've Loved Before, which was a big rom-com for Netflix. I think it kind of broke records at the time. And that track off the back of that sync just kind of has become this evergreen, every 3 months, every 6 months, it seems to just discover a whole new audience again. Wow. People utilizing it to soundtrack everything from like aesthetic videos. There's a lot of like home makeover, like, like a transition. This is a before, this is an after type thing, but also vintage aesthetic stuff, throwback stuff, romantic stuff. And one of the regions where this has been happening kind of more so than anywhere else is Latin America, specifically 100%, Brazil.
Yeah.
Which historically has not been in the kind of top markets for this artist, and now she's able to play to thousands of people in Sao Paulo, in Rio de Janeiro, off the back of this track just kind of blowing up on TikTok Brazil, us leaning into that with kind of Portuguese local language creators and influencers, working with TikTok Brazil. I think we have banners and a kind of sound page put up on TikTok around the song as well. So those have been examples of like how we actively or kind of retrospectively, I suppose, jump on existent trends once they've already kind of caught fire. But we have not yet been able to master like making a viral moment out of nothing. But
I think
anyone can.
Zooming out a little bit too, a lot of people listening are independent artists that might be doing this by themselves, might be doing this with just one manager, right? And audience development, right? That's an interesting term, like, because it focuses on things like fan engagement, on things like, we always say like save rates, followers are better than just streams, right? So if you could give some advice to an artist that's just starting out and starting to develop their audience, what direction would you point them in? Like where should they start? What should they focus on? How do they get their first steps?
Yeah, sure, totally. I mean, this is a question that I get all the time from our own brand new artists. Yeah. So I think I'll walk you through our process, right?
Sure,
I'll walk you through how we treat a brand new artist. So one of the first things that we'll do is we have a product, I suppose, that we create internally called an audience DNA. And that uses a variety of first-party analytic tools from the platforms themselves, i.e. Spotify for artists, Instagram analytics, TikTok analytics, whatever, with third-party subscriptions and tools that we have as part of our tech stack.
Yeah.
We combine those to create a report that will be, pretty in-depth, probably 20 plus pages, that looks at an artist's audience, an artist's potential audience as well, because their audience might just be couple of thousand, couple of hundred people at this point. Sometimes we'll get involved with an artist when they are brand new.
Wow.
And it will look at, who the current audience is, who the potential audience could be, and by who. What we really try and do is drill into not just like the very basic age and gender information that you get from some services where it's like 55% female, 45% male. It's like, how useful is that really? And similarly, how useful is it to know that X amount of your followers are in the 24 to 34 bracket? It's like, well, you can't flatten people into, do you know what I mean? So we'll try and dig into not just the demographic information, but real affinity data. So looking at things like what media do they like, what TV shows, what influencers do they follow, what brands are they likely to think is cool, and that just gives us, it's not always necessarily like an exhaustive content strategy that completely dictates everything on how the campaign is run, but it gives us a little bit of a North Star that we can be like, okay, in everything that I'm doing on this campaign, in every content strategy that I'm crafting, in every whatever, remember these 5 things that came out
pillars.
of that report. Exactly, pillars.
But I want to pause there because this is so interesting, because one of the biggest challenge for developing artists that are self-releasing is how to keep brand consistency through the messaging without being too redundant, without becoming boring, and yet they know just by the click rates on different posts that the lifestyle ones usually get way more engagement than promoting the new song, the new video, or the 100%. Show that's up and coming. And this is usually where they start to lose a bit of authenticity, because they feel compelled to posting about the avocado toast or things that they know will get more clicks but have no relevancy to what they're trying to get across. When you do identify those topics and affinities, how do you usually hone in on that? Because I'm assuming that the artist doesn't necessarily come from that subculture. It's just an affinity, i.e. like if the artist comes from the skateboarding scene, then it's kind of obvious that you have an audience to tap into there.
Yeah, it's great when that does exist, when there is a kind of like, when you have an artist that is very multidimensional, and as well as music, they also have like some other weird passion and hobby. I'll give an example there of a fantastic artist we work with called Heartworms, and the lead singer is obsessed with planes, preferably military planes, World War II aircraft. And she's a big fan of Airfix, which sometimes I get blank stares from Americans when I mention that. In the UK, Airfix is a very, very well-known brand of model airplanes, model whatever. You buy them, you assemble them, you paint them. Exactly, with like your little microscope painting the wings, different colors and whatever.
Your basement.
Totally, yeah. Like it's deep hobbyist stuff. And she's super into it. And so she's making kind of these side project videos, and it's like we've brought in just as many fans from the Airfix community than we have. And she's sort of like, by the way, I also make music. Do you know what I mean? And to the point where actually we brokered a brand partnership with Airfix. They did a custom thing with her, which is really cool. So that made the artist happy, and that's great when you do have that, because it's like, great, we can break up, to your point, like we can break up the endless, like pre-save the new single, like tour dates, that's a constant struggle that we have with artists, is like the blend of how many are for you versus how many are for the fans, and kind of 80-20 normally tends to be our kind of guiding rule. But, you'll have pressure from managers being like, these tour dates aren't selling out. We need to be really hammering this, guys. We need like a post every single day being, have you got your tickets to this yet? And that obviously has to be balanced with the fact that just engagement is going to crater if you do that. But I'm interested to hear it phrased the way you phrased it, which is that actually almost the opposite can happen, where there's a risk where the artist sees the feedback that the lifestyle stuff performs better than the salesy stuff, and so they end up just like chasing the lifestyle content, and that in turn feels inauthentic. I think it's also a facet of like, when I first started doing this, or certainly if you roll back the clock, kind of 7-8 years, when it was like Instagram and Facebook were still the primary communications channels. And the ask that we had of artists was a lot easier back then. It would be the good old days of like, send a social schedule over once a week to the artist. All the artist really had to do was like take a nice photo of a sunset every now and again, nice photo of some avocado toast. We could write the schedule. They might rewrite a couple of posts to make it more in their tone of voice. Happy days, and it goes out. Now it's, the video demands, the content creation demands have changed so much. And that, I think, is the biggest change in the last 10 years of just like, again, you used to be in your planning meeting talking about what your campaign toolkit was on this campaign. And you'd be like, okay, we've got a music video for single 1. We've got a music video for single 2. We've maybe got a making of the music video. There'll maybe be a tour diary piece. that's about it. And you'd be like, yep, happy days. That sounds like all the video I'll need for this campaign. Really.
In a sense, it was way closer to the film industry process you were describing.
100%. 100%. Whereas now it's much more, we're asking artists to be creating kind of multiple pieces of short form video content that's very edited, very polished. And some artists, tends to be younger Gen Z ones, are incredibly native with TikTok, with YouTube Shorts, with whatever. And I've stood over the shoulder of one of them and watched them at speed that baffles me in my late 30s. Like, just throw together filters and, cuts and camera changes and whatever on a phone in 30 seconds. And, if you can do that, more power to you. But also, not every artist can, and nor should we expect every artist to, as well as being an artist, also be a social media editing expert. We've just beefed up our audience development offering in our head office, which is London, which is where some of my team sit. And we've brought on board for the first time in-house content creation, which is something that historically we've just never had. And now we have this wonderful person that goes along to gigs, can create a content shoot day out of nothing, just rent a studio space, take along, a couple of cameras, a couple of fisheye lenses, a couple of mics, whatever.
Just make
amazing content. Or even what it will sometimes be is an artist that's well, we're not all going to be together on this campaign cycle. I live in LA, the bassist lives in New York, the whatever lives in London. But what we can do there is we'll work with artists to we'll just have a shared iCloud camera roll folder.
That's smart.
And they'll just be hearting things that they've seen on their travels recently. And then our content creation person can just kind of whip that up into a TikTok. And that, I think, is a big part of the label toolkit at the moment, is being able to make it as easy as possible for
good content.
For good content to be not something which is solely an ask that we place at the artist's feet, how can we help? How can we alleviate that stress a little bit?
Because there's a real generational platform gap here. As someone who comes from labels, I feel that we're now in the point where the artist has probably more knowledge and the right reflexes than the team of advisors that are sitting on the other side of the table recommending the next steps. And so how do you constantly stay relevant and add to what they're doing?
Totally. I mean, and in some cases like that, our job is to kind of get out of the way, really. Because if you do have an artist that, again, to use the example I used a few minutes ago of standing over the shoulder of a young artist that can just whip it all up together. My job there is very much not to tell a 23-year-old, kid that I know better than them what is going to kind of pop off. And that's wonderful. When that happens, there is no substitute for an engaged artist that knows their audience, knows how to kind of capture content, knows what caption's going to go best with this stuff. In my experience, that's not a role that most artists want to play, but when it does happen, it's wonderful. And
cherry on top.
Cherry on top, And there, I think our role is obviously to, we work with, again, as part of our kind of tech stack, as part of our subscriptions, trend forecasting is a part of that. We work closely with several agencies, but also we have the relationship with TikTok themselves, who will let us know, guys, did you know that July is electronic month, or is hashtag song of the summer is going to be a big thing for us, coming down the pipeline, or it's going to be kind of what are we doing around the other big tentpole programming moments in the year, like Pride, kind of Black History Month, whatever else it is. And so us knowing what's coming down the pipeline there, feeding that into the artists and being just think about, there's going to be a behind the song or a kind of, studio content, for the gearheads, let's give them a tour of what did you use to make this song? What production software, what, tips and tricks. So, so that's the value that we can add in those scenarios.
So, I guess coming back to where we started here was giving some tips to independent artists, right? What we heard is just to extract it out, find affinities, right? Like
find affinities and know your audience. I think there's more data than there ever has been in the hands of artists, as you said.
100%.
You used to have to sign to a label if you really wanted to get kind of, focus group level, kind of consumer insights. Yeah. These days, so much of that stuff is available at your fingertips. So I would say just keep an eye under the hood on what's reacting and what's not. It's a process of elimination, especially with the more scattergun kind of asymmetrical platforms like TikTok, services like Reels and Shorts, where, you're not just seeing stuff from who you follow, you're seeing stuff from everyone, and it's incredibly scattergun. So you can just test and learn. You know? Honestly, that's when
iterate.
When we're on iterate, exactly. When we're in kind of stealth mode, as we sometimes refer to it, on an artist where the first single's not going to come out for 6 months or so, but we still need to be doing active grassroots audience development work in the background to kind of, build you up to the point where you're not just cold releasing a song to no one. When we're in that kind of stealth mode setup, that's what we do. It's just test and learn. Honestly, just try different things, try different, content styles, different tones of voice, and just figure out what works. Obviously, always with the guidance and the help of the artist to be this is what feels natural to me. Although some artists need a lot of help in that as well. Yeah. Bands in particular, you'll have a band with 5 people in it, and it's okay, what's the tone of voice? You're 5 completely different people, obviously, with 5 different tones of voice. How are we going to hit upon an identity for this artist, Whereas in some cases at the other end of the spectrum, you have artists that are no, I know exactly how I want to sound, and no label person is going to tell me that this works better or this doesn't. So work on a tone of voice. Work on understanding who your fans are. Yeah. And my team, when they listen to this, will roll their eyes because I'm always using this phrase. But world building is a phrase which I use a lot of. Yeah. And I think that if you look at breakout artists of the last 5 years, whether it's Lil Nas X, whether it's Billie Eilish, whether it's whoever, Lewis Capaldi, completely, they all have a very distinct identity, a very distinct tone of voice, and they all have worlds that you can disappear into. And know what you're getting on board for. Fans don't even necessarily hit the follow button because they love everything that you're putting out on Spotify. Social media is not a DSP. It's not a music consumption platform. It's a overall vibe consumption platform. And I might follow an artist for the vibe. For the vibe. Their actual musical output might be secondary to just the world and the vibe and the fan activity that I see in the comments as well. I might just get the sense that, Fred Again is a great example,
that's
right?
True. Yeah.
Where, I personally like Fred Again's music a lot, but even if I didn't, I might just think that everything that he was doing, I might just find community in what's going on his Discord, which is a very, very, very active Discord community where fans are sharing all sorts of other great music that they found. They're doing meetups and stuff. So I think have a world that people can kind of disappear into. We try and cultivate that as much as we can in our artists. And at the very extreme end of the spectrum, you have a campaign that I loved recently in this regard was for Sleep Token, the anonymous British metal band signed here now out of RCA New York. But the absolute kind of rabbit hole that you could fall down of piecing together little Easter eggs and coordinates and whatever hidden in the liner notes. There's a whole deep dive, that you could do on it. And I love that. It doesn't need to be that circuitous. That's fun, but it doesn't always need to be that, because I think some people would hear oh my God, world building, that sounds like a whole nother thing that I have to watch.
Sounds like Minecraft.
Yes, exactly. And Minecraft is a fun place to build campaigns as well.
No, and it's a skill in and of itself. Some artists are great at it, other artists need to develop it, but it all kind of comes back to that fan engagement idea of engaging the fans in a way that lets them interact with you in a community. Also owning that community, I think, is a big, topic. I was doing a panel about email list growth. That's a big thing. I'm sure that's something you guys focus on a lot, right?
Yeah. So, we We also, in the expansion of my team, hired a kind of direct-to-fan communities expert for the first time, which we haven't had. And I think you're seeing a lot of labels leaning into that, labels and management companies, staffing up in that area of like community experts. So getting away from your mass communication, social media platforms, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, X, whatever. Instead, what are you doing on Discord? What are you doing on the subreddit? What are you doing on whether it's Lalo or OpenStage or your kind of your first party kind of direct fan, things like Instagram broadcast channels, things like WhatsApp communities and WhatsApp channels as well. Like we're experimenting with them a lot more. We just with Kneecap, we just put a bootleg track out that existed exclusively on SoundCloud because we wanted it to feel very rough and very kind of purely for the fans, a bit more of a street track thing. And that was one that was just exclusively dropped on their WhatsApp community. We didn't push it out on, their Instagram feed or on stories or anything. It kind of just went to the community. We told people about that first to kind of drive the signups to it. And I love those direct channels because the conversion rate is so much higher there because it's a channel that's like really, really direct. It's not just the feed where as well as, oh, look, there's a Kneecap single. Oh, look, here's something awful that happened in the news today. Oh, here's a recipe for pasta. Oh, here's, do you know what I mean? Like the kind of content soup where everything is thrown together and kind of just loses its shape and loses its meaning. I love those direct to fan properties and channels. And another artist I'll call out as being wonderful at cultivating those is Arlo Parks, who we've been working with for, 5 years now at this point. And on her first album, a lot of which the rollout took place during the lockdowns. So we were very limited in what we could do in terms of like signings in a record store and performances and, all those other grassroots things that you want to be doing, you couldn't do. So we were doing things like poetry is a big kind of facet of Arlo's appeal. And she's a wonderful poet as well as being a songwriter and a musician and she's such a multi-hyphenate. And she was hosting these poetry readings, poetry slams almost on Zoom, which you had to sign up to, be in with a chance to attend this thing. Arlo would read some of her own poetry. Wow. And the most beautiful thing was so many of Arlo's fan base have always been themselves artists, writers, poets, painters. That's just a wonderful kind of characteristic of her core fan base. And they were sharing their own poems on there. Arlo was giving kind of feedback on them. They're then like they were all swapping Instagram handles, and there's now like an Instagram DM chat which Arlo is in, where they so cool. share music and stuff. So I love stories like that where we can just give fans something that feels really personal and really cool. And not every artist has the time to necessarily set that up. But I think that when you're starting out, you have no excuse not to do that. Do you know what I mean? Like when you're in that grassroots phase, it needs to be kind of all the taps on all the time.
And those are the people that come out to shows. Those are the people that end up buying merch. Those are the people that actually engage. Yeah. Which then, And
I'm very interested in these plethora of direct fan platforms, especially the ones that have dashboards that let you follow your super fans around the various kind of interactions and events and be like, okay, so we know that these guys, not only have they streamed the new single more than 10 times within the first 2 weeks that it's been out, but we also know that they have spent over $50 on the merch store in the past 12 months. And we also know that they've clicked through to a gig. I think we're not quite there yet, but I dream of a world where there is that much data at artists and their teams' fingertips to be able to be like, okay, I know exactly who these 50 people are out of my following base that might be in the tens of thousands, but there's going to be within those tens of thousands 100 or so maybe people that like really hang on your every word and really, and superfans I think has become
term
this very thrown around term, and it's a hot topic, but for good reason, because I think that as the streaming market begins to mature, we're seeing the year-on-year growth from streaming begin to kind of plateau in some markets, not in others. I think that I'll be watching with interest what Spotify launch when they supposedly launch this kind of pro superfan tier. I know that I believe Hi-Fi high fidelity streaming is included within that. But, I'm not the first person to suggest that there might be a future in which there's all these mid-tier price points. There's all these super plus price points that you might be able to introduce for really, really unbeatable direct to fan experiences. I'm always super inspired by what is going on in the K-pop world.
Yeah.
And the Korean music market, a lot of the markets in the Far East generally, they're years ahead of what we're doing here in terms of the amount of micro interactions and thus micro transactions you can have between an artist and a fan. You'll have artist apps where you can pay not much, like 50 cents or something to get like a voice memo from your favorite artist or whatever. And that's all happening within the artist's own to kind of direct app. So I feel like if I was ever in the position where I'm the digital advisor to Beyonce or Harry Styles or whatever, I'd be like, let's get you off Instagram. Let's get you off Twitter. You'll maybe post on there once per album cycle, but most of it's going to be happening in an environment that we can control, where we can introduce all these fun little additional offerings for the super fans. I think we're not far away from Western artists leaning into that more.
It's really interesting you reframe it like this, because a few big artists experimented with that idea, but the flip side of the coin was, let's not be on DSPs. The migration was away from, I don't like the Spotify streaming payout, so I want my super app where my music is monetized at a level where I'm comfortable with. Whereas here, it's really the engagement that is migrated. And I find that fascinating.
Well, I think it's people, we're now however many years into social media, right? 20 years into social media. When did Facebook start? 2005, 2006? I'm not sure exactly when. I think it's about 20 years ago. I got it when I went to university in 2006, because those were the days where you had to have a university email address.
Yeah.
It was still tied to it was still a college thing.
Yeah.
And then they opened it up to everyone's mum and dad. And
so 05, 06.
Yeah. So anyway, we're 20 years in, let's say, to social media. And I think that we've all seen the risks of building your audience on another person's platform, right? Where you're kind of renting your audience, because we know that there have been so many pivots and so many algorithm changes. If you work in social media, they're all seared into your brain of like when they suddenly started deprioritizing certain types of content in newsfeed, or suddenly if your video was a live video, it would become super juiced, and so everyone was just doing these silly live things that would even be just a static image, but they'd upload it as a live video because they knew it would be good for the algorithm. And so your overnight platforms can make these changes, and your content strategy suddenly is worthless, and your audience suddenly is,
harder to reach,
way harder to reach. And that's another thing, is the throttling of organic reach, right? That's a thing that has been a major thing to contend with. And so I think we've all seen the danger of putting all of your eggs into building this audience strategy on a platform that might not even be around in a couple of years. Look at the potential still of TikTok being banned in this country. We still don't know what's going on there. So I think that's why I'm always a big fan of like mailing list, SMS list, SMS is whatever huge. It is, Discord, just like things where your relationship as the custodian of that data is just, it's your kind of portability of that data is ensured much more than it is. Because that's the thing. If you suddenly have a new platform that starts tomorrow, you might have however many on Instagram, however many on TikTok. Migrating people to a new platform is very hard. And it takes a long time, So become a specialist by all means, but also be mindful of the fact that things change, the winds change. Yeah.
The email list is also the highest ROI channel, in my opinion, because it's like the cheapest thing to collect. I mean, in terms of, you can do it mostly for free, but even running ads to generate leads to into an email list is very cheap. And it's where people buy. It's like where you can actually sell merch and concert tickets. So it's the cheapest thing to collect and the highest
I also
yielding
think
one.
The cheapest thing to collect, we have always done just like super old fashioned, like street team at the show, walk around with a clipboard, be like, who wants to join the mailing list? Like, I still see huge value in just having a team member down, just like capturing, you might come away with 50, 100 new names, per show. And that's great. I think that what really interests me about email as a channel in particular, and this is a kind of nerdy side topic, I guess, but like, so the rise of Substack, right? Mm-hmm. The fact that you have so many prominent journalists from everywhere, from the New York Times to Wired to, whatever, Vanity Fair, like what were once these top tier magazines, journalism is now kind of almost being unbundled in the way that the song was unbundled from the album with the launch of like iTunes and digital download. And so now if you love a certain sports writer or a certain culture writer or whatever, but you don't want to pay for a whole New York Times subscription, or you don't want to pay for a whole newspaper or whatever, these writers are now going off and launching their own Substack. Yeah. And I love that. I spend way too much money on way too many Substacks. And that's a separate thing. But I find, I don't know, just your inbox now being not just where you get like a reminder about an Amazon thing that you forgot you ordered, but like some of your favorite writing, like some of the things that you look forward to getting most are now coming through in people's inboxes. And so I think that it just makes email even more important as a channel. And I think some artists have experimented with that quite well. Like Dua Lipa runs a great newsletter called Service 95, I think it's called, which is sometimes about music, but it's also just a channel for her to have interesting artists on there, guests, kind of restaurant recommendations, travel recommendations, whatever it is. And I think the blurring of that line is fantastic. And I think you're going to see more innovation in that space.
So, Tom, with all this in mind, if you were an independent artist or the manager of an independent artist and you had $100
$100
to spend
lunch, $100
dinner
in New York
to get things moving. I didn't say where.
Okay, sorry. But, I'm thinking like a New Yorker.
Where or how would you allocate that?
Do you know
around a single release to put a bit of context on that?
It would go to content for me. To be honest with you, I say this often to people when they're like, we're doing an ads plan on Instagram for, I've got $100 for this market. And I'm like, you might as well throw it out the window. I'm sorry to say, like, I don't believe in the ROI of such small spends like that. Such a small ad spend is just going to be a drop in the bucket. I would say just put it into content, take that money and put it into a couple cool videos with $100. You could probably rent a studio space. You could probably bring a couple of looks down, and just make 10 TikToks.
100%.
That would be that honestly would be my recommendation to a manager.
Creative is the new targeting. That's like one of the things I'm seeing with running ads. It's like you can run this same audiences, same targeting, same everything in two different creatives and get wildly different
well, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier about test and learn and iterate. Like your approach on paid should be the same as your approach on organic, which is A/B testing.
Iterate, completely. Tom, I think we're coming up on time, but we do like to set aside some time at the end to ask you, what is the best piece of advice you've received, either professionally or just as a human, that you'd like to impart on anyone listening?
Oh, wow.
Can be multiple.
Gosh, that's such a great question. I wish I'd had more time to think about what.
That's why we reserve a little bit of time at the end.
If it makes it easier, you can say 2 pieces of advice.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll do one professional and one personal.
Nice.
I think one professional would be, and this is within the context of like working at a record company. So this is not necessarily geared towards the independent artist, but if we have listeners that like work at a label, I would say 2 music industry pieces of advice that I've been given both by my former boss, Tom March, who now runs Capital. One is like, he's a big fan of like, you have to PR your PR and you have to market your marketing. Do you know what I mean? And that means like in a world where the question is asked more and more loudly of like, what do labels actually do for artists? Do artists need labels when I can just upload my song on Spotify and just go viral like that? What do labels even do? I think like he was a big believer in like top managers. They want to see what you're doing. Don't assume that everyone knows all the hard work that you're doing, because it is hard work.
Yeah.
You know, it's a proper grind, and there's 100 little tasks that go into
the whole,
totally. And let them and the wider team see what you're doing. You know, like a manager needs to see like, this is what and I'm not talking about just like busy work for busy work's sake, you know, to kind of make yourself look busier than you are. But what I am talking about is don't assume that everyone knows what's going on, and don't be afraid to shout about it. That was a good piece of advice. And the other one was just that music is a relationships game, you know, like it's a very, very interpersonal relationships led business. And so just be nice to people and remember people's names and take an interest in what they do, and don't be you know, like, I'm looking over your shoulder to see who else I can talk to at this party, who else can do something for me or whatever. Like the dude that you might think right now is a kind of nobody that you've got like stuck talking to at this mixer might in 5 years be, you know, really on the up, you know. And I'm not saying you should only be nice to people because you expect something in return one day. But it's a wise piece of advice of just like,
it's a good karma thing.
Remember people. Exactly. That's it, man. It's just like in personal life, you know, like be good and hopefully good things will happen to you. And I guess personal advice, best piece of personal advice I've ever been given. I'll go to something that my wonderful mum taught me at a young age, which is the power of a good apology. I think that a lot of people, when they mess up, which we all do, sometimes can be quite proud and can sometimes be quite stubborn and really don't want to just like throw their hands up and be like, look, I really screwed this up. And look, I want to do better and I want to meet you in the middle here. Sometimes there can be a tendency, maybe it's a male thing as well, to just be a little bit too proud to say those words, I'm sorry, you know? Elton John said it best. Sorry always seems to be the hardest word. And my mum told me...
What a quote to end on.
And my mum told me when I was a kid, like, master the art of a good apology. So, I think that's a professional and a personal.
That's great advice. That's, wow.
Thank you so much, Tom. It was such a pleasure to have you on today.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. And we'll catch you on the next one.